Special.
You're live, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. All right, Council, I'd like to call a special committee of the whole meeting for October 26, 2023 to order with adoption of the agenda. So we'll make that motion. Councilor Cherry, Councilor Staples, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Adoption of the minutes that are nil. I guess we don't have anyone. Okay, we're going right on to staff reports. Housing Committee of the whole presentation. Ms. Rousseau, you're up.
Okay, let's plug in my computer here. Hey, good afternoon, Mayor and Council, everyone in the room. So we're here today to talk about the Housing Solutions Project Management Plan. I'd like to start by introducing our internal collaboration team for this project. It consists of Community Economic Development, who has been leaders in working with community partners to understand housing needs and challenges and to pursue grant opportunities. We also have the Planning and Development Division of the city, who have put Revelstoke on the map with the last couple of years of their development regulatory tools to support non-market housing, as well as opportunities for land disposition and grant funding, and general encouragement for the market to provide the housing that we need here. And then you have Corporate Services, who is hoping to work with these two divisions to bring these city efforts together on housing in the pursuit of a feasibility analysis to look at what the city can do more, take on a more active role respecting the housing supply chain to address non-market housing issues. So why create a project management plan? Well, the project management plan serves as a roadmap to ensure that we stay on target and achieve our intended project outcomes. This is particularly useful in projects with complex subject matters such as housing, where deviation from the charted path can distract from us realizing our objectives and our timelines in the project. And so this roadmap allows us to stay on track and make sure that we achieve what we intend to achieve. Don't go for the squirrel. So why are we here? So on August 8th, Council provided us with direction to provide a report outlining the details of a feasibility plan to investigate a Revelstoke Housing Authority. When we looked at this directive, we thought that we could achieve more for the city and for the community on a similar budget. So we thought this was a great opportunity to build and improve relationships with our housing supply partners and achieve a better understanding of what is happening with our housing challenges here in Revelstoke, and set a clear focus on where the city's efforts can have the most impact moving forward, and understanding the resources that we're putting into that. So given the situation that we have here and the knowledge that we have on housing, we've created a project plan that includes 5 phases. It's intended to be completed over approximately 8 months. So we hope to have this wrapped up by summer. So the project includes, it's a fact-finding mission, and we're looking to lay the foundation for the city's long-term focus on proactive involvement of housing solutions. We want to build upon and establish new relationships and partnerships that will affect mutual and broad community benefit. The project plan includes 7 objectives and 7 deliverables. The first objective is to understand the city's housing role or roles. How many roles do we actually have in that housing supply chain currently? And what are the fiscal impacts of those roles? What resources are we putting into it? And are we putting sufficient resources into it in order to achieve our now goals? We'd like to communicate this to council and the community and internally so that we have a really clear understanding of where we are right now. Objective number 2 is to establish council's housing goals. We have created a housing action plan. We did an update to the needs assessment, but we haven't established formal housing goals that will provide staff with a clear directive on where to funnel their energies and the resources in order to address the targets that council will set out for us. So that's one of our objectives. Objective number 3 is to set the direction for the city's role and their fiscal impacts in the local housing supply chain moving forward. So once we have those goals in place, we understand where we sit in that housing supply chain, where do we want to target our efforts. We also want to get a clear understanding of what are the goals in the non-market housing situation here for council and the community. Like I said earlier, it's housing a broad subject, so it's easy to try to grasp on to everything we can to make as much change as possible, but when we focus and target our energies, we can be more effective and more efficient in our outcomes. Objective number 5 is to know the players in the chain and understand their strengths and weaknesses. We know some of them. We've, especially economic development, has done a lot of work understanding our partners and building relationships with our partners, as have development services, but we could definitely do better, and there are partners we could know better, and this will allow us to do that. Objective number 6 is to look at different models for municipal involvement beyond your standard regulatory framework. It's a hot topic today. There's a lot of communities that are grappling with this, and in the last couple of years, municipalities are really coming more into the fold on being active in non-market housing and finding solutions, and it is definitely challenging, but there's a lot happening out there, and I think we can learn from what is happening out there, what's working, what's not. Objective number 7 is to determine, once we have all of this information, we're going to determine the city's best options to effectively target priority housing types and community housing goals, as well as fiscal impacts related to those, and this is key given the resources and tools we have available. That's really key to this project, is understanding what we have to give so that when we do provide our inputs into the housing solutions, that we're being as effective as possible. So that being said, we do have 7 deliverables, and these deliverables are driven by those objectives, and they're intended to lay the foundation for a long-term legacy that the city can have in partnership with its community housing supply partners to affect change in the long term, not just in the next couple of years. So deliverable number 1, as I said, is to get a lens on the local housing context. We're going to review our situation and housing needs and projections. We're going to look at demographic information. Another thing we're going to look at that we haven't looked at is all of the units in the last 5-6 years that have been approved under zoning, development permits, building permits. What are the unit counts? What are the types of units that we've approved? And what are the occupancy permits that we have approved? Where's the gap in between those numbers? Because I suspect they're not identical. So that'll kind of give us a sense of how long it's taking to get those to result in move-in ready units, and which type of housing and types of units perhaps are being stalled. We're going to summarize all this. We're going to present it to council, and we're going to provide it internally to staff as a baseline and communicate it to the community. Deliverable number 2 is council non-market and employee housing tours. So a fun field trip. We'd like to get you all on a bus, and we'll have a tour of existing and in-stream non-market housing as well as employee housing. So if you didn't know, currently we have approximately 258 units of non-market housing in the community, with 203 coming online. And existing employee housing developments. Now this is typically in bed counts, 348. And in-stream coming online, we're looking at almost 400. Again, the timing of when that's coming online, we don't exactly know, but they're either in-stream with approvals or are waiting for them to be constructed. And we'd like to take you on that tour so that once you have that baseline data, you can have a look at what we have. Where is it? Is it like, what's the proximity to amenities? What is the age of these structures? And then you're going to utilize all that information to engage in a council housing priorities workshop. So we'd like to engage a consultant for this, an independent professional who can help you take the information that you've learned so far in the project and set high-level housing goals, and then prioritize what types of housing that you'd like us to go after. Deliverable number 4 is a local housing supply chain engagement summary document. So this is where We really build that knowledge of the local housing supply chain. We find out where those bottlenecks are. How do we fit in addressing those bottlenecks? What are the existing partnerships? Are there partnerships that haven't happened yet that we could help facilitate? Are we one of those partners? This is where we put the puzzle pieces together, and the ways that we're going to do this is we're going to engage, as I said, the local housing supply chain. We're going to start with nonprofit housing roundtable. This is where we go out and we meet each nonprofit housing provider, and we just listen and we learn and we find out how their organization works, what are their goals, what are their visions. Then we will send out a questionnaire to our key engagement groups. This questionnaire will focus on the relevant organizational structure, the challenges they have, the expertise they have in-house, the partnerships they have. We're going to utilize that information to go into focus groups and draw deeper into that knowledge and understand that further. Once that's complete, we will have an engagement summary document that we will provide to council internally and again to the public. We're also going to be, as I said, looking at what other municipalities are doing right now. What sort of solutions have they implemented, or are they in the process of implementing? What are the lessons learned? How do they compare to what Revelstoke is doing? Are we a leader in those housing solutions? I suspect in some areas we are. We've been doing quite a bit. Deliverable 6 is the feasibility study. This is the real meat and the juice of the project, and all the deliverables that we've completed to date in this project will funnel into this to give us a really clear understanding on what are the potential risks and challenges of certain approaches that would work in Revelstoke, so that you know prior to going ahead with anything, what is it going to cost? Is there liability to the city? How can we do it properly? How do we work with our partners? And how long is it going to take? Let's be realistic about what these approaches can be for the city. Deliverable number 7 is when we wrap it all together. So we create a comprehensive project report of all the tasks that we've completed in this project. And we also come to council with recommendations on approaches to move forward based on all that information. So that being said, no actions on additional proactive housing solutions would occur during this project. This would be a fact-finding mission in order to make sure that we have a clear vision and a clear understanding of the situation before we take on any more housing priorities. That being said, I would like to note that any in-stream non-market housing initiatives or requests that may come down the line during the scope of this project, it's not intended to delay or stop any of those. Those should continue to move along as is. This would simply be happening on the side and in addition. And as a matter of fact, if anything does come forward during this time, it would be a great learning opportunity to add value to the project. So we have identified some key engagement groups that comprise our local housing supply chain. We have our internal departments that I mentioned. We may draw on other internal departments for support, but those are the primary players here. We'll look to local nonprofit housing organizations, community organizations that deal with the local housing supply chain, developers, property managers. This is another key area that I don't think we understand yet, the scope and the resources needed to manage and maintain non-market housing. So that's something we'd like to learn about as well. We'll talk to the builders and see if they're having any challenges or partnership needs, and also housing financiers. This is just the housing financiers component is very surface level, just to look at trends and see what are builders and developers coming forward less for loans, what income bracket are you seeing being priced out of the market, just to kind of have that whole holistic view of what's happening. This project management plan includes a communication plan. We intend to be quite communicative and responsive during this process, during the 5 phases. We will have a committee of the whole presentation for every single phase of the project. If we feel anything comes up that needs council's direction or that council should be informed about, We can have additional meetings, most definitely, or communicate through our CAO. The city leadership team will be regularly informed of what's going on with the project. Key engagement groups will have a project kickoff and high-level summary in phase 1, and an invitation to all those key engagement groups to participate. Phase 2 is when we do the engagement, and phases 1 through 5 with the engagement groups, again, regular updates, distribution of deliverable documents, and we also have an email for anyone in the community who wants to ask questions or get information. That will go directly to the team, and we will post any questions and answers on Talk Revelstoke. That's how the public will be informed, through regular updates on Talk Revelstoke, city website updates, social media. We'll use City View's newsletter and any other communication channels that we think would spread the word of what we're doing. Again, the public will be privy to all of the deliverable documents once council has seen them. The project budget, we feel this project will have a minimal financial impact on the city. Largely, we're conducting the work in-house, and we think it's important, especially for the engagement, to keep that in-house, because a big part of this plan is to build relationships with our housing supply partners. And so if we have consultants, we can't do that as well as if we do it in-house. So the only consultant component of the project will be the workshop and the feasibility study, which will also require a lot of in-house staff time. We're looking at approximately $3,000 to $6,000 for the council workshop. And the range there is depending on whether or not you want that workshop to be virtual or in person. There is value to having it in person, but we can revisit that. The feasibility study is anticipated to cost approximately $35,000. We have included a feasibility study for a housing authority in our HAF application. We're still waiting to hear the results of that. We anticipate perhaps end of November. If we are awarded, that can be fully covered from the HAF funding. Otherwise, we can pool our division budgets to help with that cost. So in conclusion, the project outcome values are that we would be growing our knowledge of the housing supply chain and the challenges and bottlenecks that exist and where we can affect the best change. We'd be building relationship with our community partners in the housing supply chain, which can add value for many, many, many years. We're understanding where we're at, the resources we have, and the best approaches to address our local housing challenges. And having a roadmap, essentially, this would result in a clear roadmap on where we're going forward, how we target our resources, and how we come back to council and when to make sure that we're fulfilling our housing goals and priorities as desired. So I don't know if the rest of the team wants to add anything other than the fact that I would say is we're looking for council to endorse this project management plan. Should you agree with it?
Nothing more to add.
You're all okay? Thank you, Julie. Any questions, council? Councilor Cherry.
Just a comment. I think this is fantastic, and definitely gonna endorse it myself. Great to see this happening, and I really appreciate the presentation.
Mr. Parliament.
Just a quick question, Jaylene. Where would the city did an extensive and exhaustive land inventory, as you know. We looked at all the parcels municipally owned. We have a list of all those parcels. Where does that fit in with the plan? I know it's part of the tour, but just sort of elaborate. I think I know the answer. Where would that inventory list of all the lands sort of fit in with the PNP?
I'm going to let Mr. Simon take that question.
So I guess through your worship to Mr. Parliament, the main idea with the land inventory was just to get a baseline of where we're at and what lands we have available. But with the land disposition policy that was recently adopted, every single year council can decide if we need to release more lands to the non-market housing sector in order to allow for housing development on them. It could certainly fit into multiple areas of this plan, but should council desire to have more lands available for non-market housing, and when we ultimately do move forward towards the conclusion of this process and have a more robust idea of what the city's role in the long term is going to be with respect to non-market housing, whether that's the housing authority for the collaboration with our non-market, our nonprofit housing sector partners. Then we have all these lands that can potentially be disseminated to the non-market housing sector.
Thank you.
So they could be under control from something like a housing authority or nonprofit housing providers.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, any comments? Any questions? Councilor Orlando.
Your worship, yeah, through the chair, a few questions and follow up on the presentation, and thanks staff for working on it and bringing it forward to us. So the first one is focusing on partnership commitment. Over at Robeson Community Housing Society, where I sit on the board as a council rep, we have a lot of momentum. We have a really skilled and talented team, and we also have just a really great participation from staff in the past year, including pretty much everyone here giving a presentation, showing up at meetings frequently, talking about what's going. We have significant access to funding that enables us to move forward with ongoing projects and our next building projects. Today, leadership was down at the community center working on development plans for the Oscar Street land. So these are great. I guess as we move through this process, in reaching out to stakeholders and partners, one of the concerns expressed or concerns to address is, is that partnership going to continue as we go through this one, or are we putting a pause on things like various funding streams that we have, staff time and support in doing things like infrastructure studies and ongoing liaison with nonprofits. So I guess I'm reaching out to council more to find out about if there is a commitment there for partnership, an ongoing partnership commitment as we move forward. So making sure we are continuing to move our legs as we go through this, and continuing to build as we go through what will be an 8-month process, and then again a new starting point middle of next year through this process. So just hoping to gather feedback and gather support from council for continuing on this effectiveness path of building another building and including partnerships with BC Housing. So just got any thoughts.
Any comments from council? So I'm going to go back to Ms. Rousseau. So from what I've heard, relationships and whatnot that we have in the mix will still be continuing on. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, most definitely. And in fact, we're trying to improve those relationships and build new ones where they don't exist right now. We have the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund that was established recently. We have the OAP funds. At the moment, there's nothing in the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund. The OAP funds, I believe, are at $560,000, which will only get us so far. So it's really, really important that we have a holistic view of what's going on, and that we address all aspects of the housing supply chain, because there's only so much money, and money is only one component of this housing solutions that we need. And that 561 can run out quite quickly, and we don't have deadlines for when more money is coming in. We're going to actively seek those opportunities, most definitely. But partnerships and getting things moving and supporting the local housing supply chain in any way that we can, that our resources permit and that council directs, is our priority, most definitely.
Perfect, good. And thank you for that, because when you were doing your presentation, that's what I heard through there, is that, despite the fact that we're going down this 8-month road, there's still going to be those projects that we're going to be able to move forward and go along with that. So, Councilor or Mr. Parliament.
Go ahead. You didn't hear it? No? So on that point, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I had questions when this was first proposed, the PMP, and that you could easily mistake this exercise to put everything on hold while we continue down this path for 8 months. But I've been told through the team, yourself, Jaylene, Taha, and Paul, that we can run several parallel projects, that this is not to put anything on hold, this PMP. It's simply to collect the facts, the data, meet with our potential stakeholders, and come up with a plan. But we can also run parallel projects and parallel funding opportunities. So for example, Ingrid and I are putting the final touches on a second REDUP application, which is due Monday for 500,000. We're allocating 100,000 of that to go into the Oscar Street project, and looking at $400,000 to assist our utility. And so that exercise is an example of these parallel processes that can happen. They can happen in concert with this PMP. So I'm very comfortable that this proposed PMP is not to put everything in hold. It's simply to collect this information we need while we work with our partners on these other projects and other funding opportunities.
Okay, appreciate that. Councillor Orlando, follow up to your question. Do you have any comment?
Your worship, no, not really. Thank you for the responses from staff. I do appreciate that. I wanted to move on to another point, and this is really zeroing in on effectiveness, for all levels of government, including local government. One of the sort of vision statements in the plan here talks about stating that, I cut and paste this out of the presentation. I can't locate it right now in front of me, but it says like the goal is to understand the needs of the local housing supply chain to best position the city to be an effective and results-oriented housing solutions partner. I really like that wording, and that was wording from staff. And the keywords are effective and results-oriented. I think we all realize we're for better or for worse, late to the game that and are facing a housing crisis are here in the province and in Revelstoke, and we need to continue to be delivering. So I wanted to gather council as well as staff's thoughts on elevating that statement with a focus on effectiveness and results oriented. And again, I see that the presentation has listed several different studies that have been completed over the years with housing. I do understand the importance of and the necessity of completing a lot of these planning processes and of not putting them down. For example, there may be a requirement for provincial government or for accessing funding. But I also want to lend an ear to concerns that we often, when often confronted with a real life challenge, such as people not being able to find a place to live or getting evicted out of the community because they have nowhere for them and their family to live, to plan again. So what I am seeking is council's thoughts on elevating that statement that focuses on effectiveness and results oriented approach to this overall exercise.
Okay. So when you're saying elevating, are you meaning speeding up that process? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, yeah, it would mean many things. I would say enshrining it in the wording at this point would put a focus on things like that, and I don't want to get into details of, what is laid out here, but sometimes I kind of like, of the 7 objectives, I see some things that like, oh, that's 3 weeks of work. Oh, that's 4 weeks of work. Does that really need to happen? Could that be some emails and we achieve that? Those kinds of things. So there'll be hundreds of, I would imagine there's dozens of cascading decisions from that. But the key thing is focusing on effectiveness and being results oriented, as well as, as any long-term planning process you engage in, you want to be effective over the long term. But we just, really I'm talking about we're in a crisis now and we need to be putting numbers on the board right now. So that was my first thing I talked about this time is as we're going through this, we need to think about expediting this and getting some wins as we go, as well as in the near term.
Okay, good. So when I'm looking at this as a kind of in a holistic point, I look at all the things that we've got on the go, but we're dealing with the zoning bylaw. We're talking about how we can do infill. We're giving some focal points as far as what the Oscar Street lands can hold, what they can do. So I think we're going in the direction that you're wanting to go, Councilor Orlando, to expedite things so that we can actually get boots on the ground and get building done. And then when I look around the community with the work that's being done now, I think the biggest holdback on some of this stuff might be interest rates. But for those who can afford, they're still moving forward with their building. So I think we're already heading in that direction. And if we're not standing in the way of those who want to build, then I think we are moving in that direction. But I'm going to hear from staff and then council as well.
To your worship, one of the key things, so through your worship, Councilor Arundel, all these processes, as Mr. Rousseau indicated, will be happening in parallel. We want to walk and chew them at the same time. We adopted an OCP last July. One of the key things in there was supporting multi-unit housing throughout the community. We've adopted development approval procedure bylaw updates that look at expediting applications, specifically those with an emphasis on housing. And in our OCP, we have a policy in there that says we will expedite any application that comes forward for non-market housing right now to provide immediate relief to the city. So we are wanting to do all the planning that will set us up for long-term success, while making sure that we can have allowances for the short-term immediate needs when these projects do come forward with viability. The recent policies that I give a lot of credit to this council for adopting this year, reserve, land disposition, all of that was intended. It's a really quick turnaround, 30 days to give support to nonprofit organizations to say, we will give you land, we will give you $200,000, whatever it is, to see your projects move ahead. All of this has been to add certainty to the process and to see things happen. I know it never happens as fast as everyone wants it to. We know we need earth turning tomorrow to get more housing units constructed. Interest rates certainly hamper that. Construction costs in this town, land costs are huge, and they really do hamper that. But some numbers, and Mr. Rousseau briefly, I believe, but just to give you guys a bit of an idea, we really have been looking at crunching some numbers, and the stuff that's already under construction, and it takes years sometimes for some of these big projects like RMR employee housing to come to fruition. But we got, it is 522 units that we expected, or sorry, 539 units that we expect to come online for occupancy over the next 3 to 5 years. So we definitely acknowledge we have a significant lag right now in terms of available accommodation within the community, trying to get stuff through as quickly as possible, especially those high value multi-unit projects. But it will take some time for them to come online, and it's just the reality of the construction. Sure, we all want it to happen faster. If Mr. Black is allowed to build more, then we might see some of them online faster. He likes to do stuff.
And if I may add to that, engineering is we can move extremely fast for approvals of these sorts of projects, and we do. With the Oscar Street master planning coming through, hopefully for adoption in the next little bit, we will also be servicing 3 or more lots and on that Oscar Street lands, so that if a project can come forward and fit within those property boundaries, that land will be development ready as soon as spring, early summer of next year. So the timing for that is really well, and you have my commitment that as everybody's planning and building and engineering and public works are all under my supervision at this point in time, that this is the highest priority for us.
Mm-hmm.
That commitment.
All right.
Any comments from council? Taha?
Oh, yeah. I would only add that I know that our local partners are ready to build and looking for the funding to be able to do so. And we've also heard from council that BC Housing is at the table, and those meetings are productive, and they're leading to and staff will be emphasizing that Revelstoke's ready to build when BC Housing is at the table. So I think that goes to show our partners in and out of the community that nothing is being held back at this point, and this is really the laying a foundation for what is a large decision. But just the appearance of going back to foundation doesn't mean that we have to restrict any of the ongoing developments or potential.
Thanks for the comment. Any other comments from council? Councilor Lund.
One last one, just a quick statement and then a much quicker, less long-winded question. So yeah, I just think it's a statement in general through the chair to council and staff, and I think it's important to voice these things, you know. So I'm just trying to make sure, as a political representative, that I want to say again and again. I might be repetitive, but say again and again, this huge priority. Want to move on it. I'm glad we're talking about this. I think 2017 was the first time I proposed, moving towards a housing entity with more intensive city involvement. I wish we had gotten underway then. We didn't. But nevertheless, it's great to hear those answers. And I just think it's important to put voice to them to make sure that the community is clear, that the council is clear, and everyone is clear on communication on, what priorities are. I don't want to leave it to guesswork. My last question is much more specific. And I just want to know, regarding the 7 objectives, how are key stakeholders going to be engaged in these 7 objectives? And I guess my area of concern is they will be left out for 8 months and come back. And I know it does talk about how they will be incorporated, but I just want to make sure. And one example is Revelstoke Community Housing Society has brought property management in-house, for example. So that's new capacity we have, and also have built our sort of development professional staff a lot. So that, that's definitely obviously a touch point we need to have with that organization to understand its growing effectiveness in what it does, thanks to great leadership there. And I just want to make sure we just want to make sure any stakeholder, whether it's the several groups presented here, are making clear that they're going to have opportunities for involvement and they're going to be part of this, so as we go along. So my last question.
Ms. Russo.
So as indicated through the chair to Councillor Orlando, those 7 objectives are driving those project outcomes and, deliverables. And they are closely linked together for sure. And so as we carry out those deliverables, we'll be achieving those objectives. And so for example, knowing who those key players are in the housing supply chain and building those relationships, that is going to be ongoing throughout the process, whether it be through our formal engagement of a roundtable, questionnaires, focus groups, or constant communication throughout the duration of this project. And as we create those deliverables, as I said, once council has seen them and has weighed in on them, then we can share them with the community and our stakeholders and our engagement groups. We've created the email. We're open to corresponding on a regular basis and answering questions. And again, I'll really emphasize that building relationships. That is one of the most important things that will be coming out of this project. So that part of the project won't stop when the project's over. We intend to keep that going into the future.
Great. Councilor Lusso.
Thank you, Mayor Schulz, and thank you to staff for the report and the presentation. I just want to make sure that we include people living in their vehicles. I know it's not necessarily under the scope of building housing, but we're looking at a baseline population that has been either displaced through renovictions or priced out of their housing. And as we see RMR looking to close their overnight campground, we're going to have more people coming to town, especially as we look at reducing our parking requirements for development. We're going to have more people parked on the streets, and this is going to become a bigger issue as we continue down this path. I do have a question. With the tours of the housing, do we have dates for when these are planned? I feel like it should be done before phase 2, so we have a better understanding of the different housing supply here in town.
Ms. Russo, is there a date planned at this
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Lucia. We don't have a specific date set yet, but it will be happening in phase 2. And phase 2 is beginning November. So we're hoping to get the tour done in November before it gets too snowy. I hope it's cold out there. But yeah, we think it's really important to do that at the front end to give you that information to help with your understanding and decision-making going forward.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor?
Yes. With the key stakeholders, do we have a list of the different groups that we want to talk to? And have they been informed that we're going to be looking to get input from them? Just on the timeline that we have laid out, it would be good to have contact with them before we're looking for answers. So that way we get responses that have adequate input for us to shape our decisions.
Ms. Russo.
Through the chair to Councillor Lucio. Yes, we have not reached out to them as of yet. We have engaged the Housing Society. Some are present here, and let them know that the project's coming up. However, we didn't want to reach out should council decide not to pursue this project, and then we've put an expectation out there that we can't fulfill. But should council endorse this project, we will be contacting them immediately, letting them know that this project is being initiated, what the phases are, and the timing and style of engagement. And we will continue to provide them at least monthly updates or more frequently if there's information to provide to them.
Great. Any further comments or questions, Councillor?
Yes, just a couple more. I just want to make sure that we look to the social side of things when we're looking at below market housing, as well as like second stage women housing, talking to the Indigenous Friendship Society as well. So we have First Nations housing. I think that's just a big group that we should include and include in the scope of this project. And then I also want to urge council to consider, like Mr. Simon said, we are, a 3-year lag time before we have units that can be occupied. We need to figure out what we're going to do in this interim, because if not, we're really letting down the taxpayers that we represent right now and looking too far into the future and not really addressing the needs that we currently have right now.
Okay, thanks for that comment. I'm going to disagree with you on not dealing with the needs. We're putting these things in place. You can only build so fast. I think that's the biggest concern, is how fast can we get things built? And so us getting out of the way, cutting the red tape is the way to do it. Any other comments, Councillor Cherry?
Actually, Worship, I'd like to put a motion on the table to endorse the PNP.
All right, seconded by Councillor Devlin. Any further comment on the plan moving forward? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note the motion's passed unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Russo.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions before we terminate this meeting? Any no comments?
Great job, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Russo and the team. Appreciate that. All right, I'm going to ask for someone to make a motion to terminate the meeting. Councillor Stapheners, seconded by Councillor Devlin. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you.
45 minutes.
Mr. Russo.
That'd be a record.
It's not quite a new record, but it's